Anyway, so we're up to information gathering part here. And so we're going to talk about OSINT. As this is essentially everything we're doing here. Well, some of it involves going right to the servers, but a lot of it is just information that's available even without connecting to a company at all. This open source intelligence has been around for a long time. People track down criminals like all the people in Anonymous that did the DDoS attacks against Sony and everything and hacked the FBI. They all thought they were hiding, and they weren't hiding at all. The guy that just saved us all from WannaCry, or Hitchens, in Britain, and got arrested on his way back to Britain, he did a heroic thing there, but 10 years ago he was a punk criminal doing illegal things, and he didn't do much of an effort to prevent it being easy to trace him back. He'd use the same name, register things. Most people leave trails back. The internet anonymity is really paper thin. Unless you are very, very disciplined, there will be a pretty easy way to just look at your username, look at an email account, look at a domain registration, go back and back and back, and one of these things will connect to another. And Brian Krebs is probably the king of this. He found out which Russian attacker attacked his website, who's sending out the spam, who did the target hack. You can just trace people back through the internet pretty easily. The only person I know of any fame that is successfully hidden on the internet is the Jester. The Jester has been taking down Islamic websites that he doesn't like for about 10 years now with denial of service attacks, and nobody has ever figured out who he is. And a bunch of people really have tried to find out. But apparently he claims he was in the military, and apparently he learned military OPSEC. He really uses like one machine for this purpose and never uses it for personal things. You know, most people are just pretty sloppy. They use the same name, the same machine. VPN doesn't connect and they just use it without encryption one time or something like that, and they leave a trail. But as far as anybody can tell, the Jester didn't leave a trail. A lot of people want to arrest him or kill him or otherwise find him and do things to him, and nobody can find him. Another real important issue is you have to have no friends. You have to not have any partners. That's what all the hackers told me. All the criminal hackers, because people will roll over on you to get a lighter sentence. So if you're part of any hacker gang, you're toast. But the Jester works alone. There's nobody in his gang apparently who knows who he is. So anyway, so if you're going to do a pen test, there's a lot of information out there about companies, far more than there should be. People go on bulletin boards and ask for technical help. They post resumes, they post job offers. I remember I was 3 or 4 years ago, I was on a review board for DEF CON talks, and one of them was talking about an Apache piece of middleware, the name escapes me, that you put between incompatible computer systems. And they said it was vulnerable, so I did a quick scan on the internet and I found a vulnerable system being used to print checks in Texas that had checks for some kind of medical insurance just going by, and I could alter the amounts and everything. It was just bloody awesome, and no password at all. And then I wanted to find out who this is so I could inform them. And I searched online, and just working from the initials printed on the check, I was able to figure out who they were. They were a company in Canada that outsourced their printing to a job in Texas. And then when I searched, I found the forum postings 5 years ago from the administrator that set up this insecure server asking, I can't figure out how to password protect this. Does anybody know? And nobody ever told her how, and it's just been running for 5 years without any protection. So I told them, and it vanished immediately. Put it behind a VPN, which is what they should have done. I mean, if you have something that you can't figure out how to secure, you put something in front of it to secure it, like a VPN, so people have to log into that to get to it. That is an acceptable solution. You put security outside it if you can't put security inside it, and that's what they did, of course, but they didn't do it until they got caught. Anyway, so people are out there posting technical and other issues on a variety of places, and they'll be asking questions. That was it, ActiveMQ, that was the stuff. So then there's Netcraft, which is bloody awesome. Find out what technology is powering any website. Let's play some games with Netcraft. Netcraft.com. These guys post a lot of blogs and a lot of interesting articles. And so if I want to know what some site is running, like ccsf.edu, this will just mine the internet for a bunch of information. So here's one first seen in March 2002. And let me see if I saved anything here. There's Whois also up there. Anyway, I think this would give me more information. Site report, there we are. Okay. There we go. So here's the date, here's the IP address, here's the DNS administrator, Here's the hosting history. It'll tell you what operating systems and what versions it was running and what servers it moved from site to site. This is often very useful. This is the kind of information they use to catch criminals because they're running like a personal blog, and somehow on the same server is like a botnet command and control center and a gambling site and an illegal porn site. And they can pretty much tell they're all being run by the same guy on the same box, and on you go. So there's risk rating is 0. Apparently we're not on any blacklists. We haven't been sending out evil spam and getting caught for it or anything. There aren't very many web trackers on the page, and here's more about the technology, what type of programming languages are on our site, and so on. So you can learn an awful lot about what's going on a website, and this doesn't involve sending any traffic to the company at all. This is interrogating a third party who archives it, which is good. One thing I should mention, if you go to the Google cache, if you do a Google search for somebody, like let's do that. This is a very important misconception. I had this myself. If you go here, and let's see, search for, let's say, ccsf.edu on Google, and then you find the CCSF homepage. Suppose you're trying to do a pen test on this company and you do not want them to get your IP address anywhere in your logs. So I want to know something about the page without connecting to their server. You can go to the cached server here, and you will see the copy of the page that Google collected before. So the first impression you might have is that you're not sending traffic to their server, but this is false. The only thing Google caches is the raw HTML of the home page. This image loaded from the City College server. The CS loads from the City College server, so when you view this cache, you are in fact sending a bunch of requests from your IP to the domain. It's a thing to be aware of. The Google cache is not a way to maintain OPSEC, where you do not send any traffic to the target. You'd have to use something more indirect, like Netcraft. Whois is another one we talked about before. You can do it from the command line at most ISPs. You can also go online and do it. And this will just be the record that someone saved when they registered that domain. So they had to put something in these fields when they registered, but it's never verified. Some name of the company, some name of the administrator, phone numbers, and so on. You can just put Mickey Mouse and the White House in there and nobody ever reads it or cares. But reputable businesses will put real information in there because they do want to be able to call and change the record and have someone verify that they have the authority to change things. If you don't put real information there, then anybody with good social engineering skills like the Syrian Electronic Army can call your hosting provider and tell them we've decided to move to a different server, and they will just believe it. This is a very common attack. It's very low tech. It's very devastating. The only defense against it is usually to put on DNS locks. Domain name registrars do have a series of technical measures which will lock your domain, so they have to go to a lot of effort to verify who you are before moving it, but it's expensive for them and they make it very difficult to find. I've had some blogs from Cloudflare about how to do it. Very few sites are locked. A few of them got locked about 3 or 4 years ago. The Syrian Electronic Army, which at that time was one 17-year-old pro-Assad kid, rerouted the New York Times for a whole day by this technique. And that woke up a small number of people to lock their domains, but most people continue not to lock them because they just aren't paying attention. This is like DNS queries and like BGP. This is a wide open door that takes very little skill to exploit that could ruin your whole day. All your customers will go to some fake website until you can figure out what happened and fix it. And they don't have to hack your server or get through your firewall or guess your password or anything to do it. They just need to call your domain name registrar and convince them that they are the authorized representative from your company. And that just is a measure of how smart they are at fooling people. So that's the point of Whois. This data can be fake. This used to change. It's kind of funny. It used to be if you typed whoismicrosoft.com, the top-level domain registrar, by default, would not search for top-level domain Microsoft.com. It would search for anything that contains the string anywhere Microsoft.com. So a bunch of people put insulting domains, subdomains with Microsoft.com, and so they'd show up here. This is really yepa.org, but Microsoft.com is there. This used to be a lot of fun, but they apparently fixed it. I tried it. This was a common prank on the internet for years and years. All right, so DNS queries are what you use all the time. Every time you type a URL into a browser or an email client or anything, your machine resolves the IP address with a DNS query. And there are a variety of DNS records. So let me bring them up and do them live here. We've been doing a lot more about it in the DNS class, of course, but DNS is a big part of open source intelligence. So if you do dig of, say, samsclass.info, and you don't specify what you want at all, It will just give you the most common result. It will assume you want the A record. The A record is just the plain old address record, which is the IP version 4 address, and 99% of the time this is what you want. If you want something else, you can specify it up there. Like if you were using IP version 6, you'd use the quad A record. And that gives you the IP version 6 version of the IP address to get to my site. My site is IPv6 enabled because I turned it on in Cloudflare. And so you can reach it over IPv6. A lot of sites you can't. If you want to send email, you look for mail exchanges. I have a mail exchange. I set mine to Mailinator. I don't know why I did that. But anyway, I don't really have an email service at my domain, but I guess if you email at samsclass.info, it'll go to some Mailinator server. God knows where it goes. I'm never going to see it. But anyway, you can look for DNS servers. And you'll find them here. Here's the 2 name servers from Cloudflare that service my domain. If you want the authoritative one, you go SOA, and this will tell you which ones are considered authoritative. So the master copy of every information about my domain is on that Cloudflare server. The other server is a copy of that data, and other things like the DNS and the like Google DNS and OpenDNS and Comcast DNS servers have copied some data from that server. So if you want an authoritative answer, you ask that server. There used to be an any query. A lot of people are deprecating it. Let's see if it works on mine. Yeah, any is obsoleted. Cloudflare has quit supporting it, so they just put this here to tell you, quit asking any. People have decided that's too much bother. They don't like it anymore. So here's a few examples. There's a lot of DNS records, but those are the main ones. Mail exchanger, name server. Pointer records are used for reverse DNS lookup. And you have a text record where you can put in anything you want. And there are quite a few specialized programs that require you to put something in the text record for your DNS. The most common one is SPF, the Sender Protection Framework, Sender Policy Framework, which is used to block spam. So if you want major email providers to accept email from your domain, you have to put an SPF record in a text record on your DNS server, because when they receive mail from you, they're going to look in DNS to see, is this guy really supposed to be sending mail? If they haven't put up an SPF record, they're not playing the ball right, playing the game right, and I'm going to throw away this mail because it's probably lying about where it's from. So anyway, so you can also dig a specific server. So if I look at here, remember I just found out that my SOA was Coco. I think it still is. Here's my SOA, Coco. So I can dig at Coco and then go for samsclass.info. All right, and I get, this is the theory, this information came from Coco, and I sort of thought it would be authoritative, but it doesn't claim to be authoritative, and I'm not going to hunt that down right now. But I can also look elsewhere. If I want to see, for example, what the Google DNS server thinks of me, I can go here, and I might get different information. One thing that will be different is the time. This was 300 seconds old. This is 299 seconds old. And it's still 299. We'll play with that a little more. There's 288. The problem with this test is the Google DNS server is in fact a huge cluster. And I'm actually hitting a different server every time I go in there. I'll demonstrate some of this later with a simple server that really is just a single server. But one cool thing here is DNS cache snooping. This is, like I said, DNS is really miserable for privacy, and this is one of the many defects. The most important defect of DNS is that every single time you do a query, it sends an unencrypted query off pretty far on the internet. And every time you boot up a Windows machine, it sends an unencrypted reverse lookup to the root of DNS and servers all over the place telling it your IP address, which is just stupid because Microsoft designed their DNS system poorly 20 years ago and never updated it. But anyway, the other kind of violation of your privacy is cache snooping. The resolvers all over the place. Let's try this one. I made a domain called test360.samsclass.info. I made it a few days ago, so it won't be in any caches anymore. So if I make a non-recursive query, it should find no answer, and it did find 0 answer. So a non-recursive query means I'm asking one server, do you know where this site is? And if you don't know, don't ask anybody else. Just tell me if you know right now where that site is. And the answer is this server does not know. That means nobody using that DNS server has been to this domain name within the lifetime of this record, which is usually maybe an hour or something. So if someone does use that server and resolve it, which I can do by just repeating that same query without the no recurse, this will mean I want to know where it is, and if you don't know, go ask somebody and find out where it is. So it did that. I still got no answer though, which is rude. That's fouling up my beautiful demo. Let me see if I have a better option. The one I used here was 75. Okay, let's try this. I found Link5D, I found a public resolver. You need to find somebody with a publicly available resolver who has not got anything very fancy like a server cluster. So I went to one of the links of them, and it's 5D, which is here. Okay, here's a public DNS server list, and neat, unavailable. Well, I saved the IP address here. The one I liked was PuntCat. Okay, PuntCat is 109.69.851. I tried this a couple days ago and it worked. Let's see if it still works. Oh, that's the one I just tried, isn't it? And it totally didn't work. How rude. Looks like there, I used 630. That might be the problem. Let's try 630. All right, so first I'm going to do the non-recursive query to see if this is already in the cache. And the answer is it is not in the cache. I got 0 answers. Now I'm going to do the recursive query. And now, here's the question. Now I got an answer. Good. Okay, this is working. So now it found the address. Here's the 2 addresses Cloudflare gave me, because Cloudflare is my DNS provider. So now if I go back and do the non-recursive query, I now get 2 answers. So I have my recursive query, put it in the cache, and anybody on Earth can verify that somebody's been going there. So if you want to know who's been going to a website, has anybody gone there, you can find out this way. Now for a popular site like Google or Yahoo, of course somebody goes there every second, and this doesn't tell you anything. But if you want to know if somebody at your company is going to the rival company or to whatever sites are forbidden on your location, you can do this to see if people are going there. If you are a clever malware designer, you can do things like send out email with a different domain in every email, and you can find out when somebody clicks on the link this way. And you know approximately where they are. Somebody clicked on my link because one of my crazy domains is now in somebody's cache. Caches are important. They make the internet perform faster, but since there's no authentication and you just let everybody ask any question, then it makes it possible for people to sneakily invade your privacy, and it's just up to the ingenuity of the attacker to find ways to exploit this. Anyway, let me see if I missed anything else back here. That's called DNS cache snooping. I can see, I do not get, by this technique, the exact IP address of who has been going there, but I can tell if somebody using that server has been going there. And most internet service providers like Comcast have publicly available servers, so I can tell if a Comcast customer in that part of the country has been to that site in a while. And it only works, of course, to sites that are very rarely used, where it's actually going to have no record in the cache. Another thing that's kind of fun is to watch the timing go down. So if I go to the OpenDNS cluster, let's try that. If I do the same thing here, but instead of going to this crazy PuntCat server that's just open, I go to a big one like OpenDNS. They're a San Francisco company. And if you use these numbers, which I recommend memorizing, by the way, it's a DNS server that's always up. It's a huge cluster. It filters out all the known bad domains. So if you try to, if you on a simple kind of security measure, you just install this as your DNS server at your clients, and now when they try to go to bad sites, it'll block them. It just won't resolve them. So it's a simple kind of sort of spam filter for the internet. Anyway, so if I do a non-recursive query to the OpenDNS server, oops, I have to spell it right.
What are these people called?
What's that?
What are they called?
OpenDNS.
OpenDNS.
Yeah, and so it's 222 is this one. There we are. Okay, so I got no answer. So this domain is not in the OpenDNS server. Now, if I just, there's a way to make it fit on one line. It's plus short. Okay, let's put plus short in my query here. And then it won't bother to tell me anything unless it gets an answer. So now I can do a series of queries. You can see the results on the screen. There we go. All right. So there. So it's really not in the cache. I can ask them 10 times and it gets no answers. So let's put it in the cache. I will do one of these without the no recurse. Okay, now it found some answers, so that's in the cache. So if I go back to this one, there it is, and it's not there, and it's there, and it's not there. So I'm getting the feeling that this is a cluster of about 4 servers at OpenDNS. I managed to put it in the cache of one of the 4 servers, and every time I go through, the load balancer gives me a random server. So you see I hit the other servers most of the time, but every now and then I hit that server that has the record. So I'm now leaking out some information about their network infrastructure that they would probably rather I don't have. And there were a series of very interesting articles about 3 years ago about attacking and reverse engineering load balancers. Load balancers that lead to server clusters leave marks in the traffic that you can find. You can actually tell which load balancer you're going to and which server behind it you're going to, and you can do things like attack the servers behind it and find the direct path to it. Especially the big issue then was they found some defects in the way F5 load balancers worked. F5s are big enterprise class systems that are popular, and they weren't really concealing the details behind as well as they probably should have. And as you can see, even this very indirect method, I can get some information about how OpenDNS works. Anyway,
Sam, is there a way to like what you were doing is almost kind of like trace routing, you're kind of able to see a path. Is there any tool that does that for like load balancers where you can see kind of like a round robin or a...
yeah, I know what you're asking, Kay. You want to know if there's a special tool to like map out load balancers, and there are some blogs and some projects and some sort of proof of concept tools. I don't think there's a finished high quality tool. But there's people that give talks and they put out a little tool. I don't know the name in particular though. But if you Google like F5 load balancers, you'll find a bunch of research a couple of years ago into it. And certainly, you could write your own in Scapy. That's what Scapy is awesome for. With Scapy, you can very easily make any kind of packet you want. So you could do traceroute and mix it with DNS and mix it with whatever information you can figure out about reading the headers. And like I say, some people have been working on that, developing that. But I don't know a particular tool that's ready to use easily for it. There might be something though. Anyway, here's the OpenDNS cluster. All right, and so after I did 10 recursive queries, that put it in almost all the caches, so almost all of them found it there. All right, now you can watch TTL countdown. This is another fun one. Now that I've found a way, let's go back to PunkCat. Because PunkCat was really just a single server. That was not, before I did 208, okay, it was this thing. Okay, 109.69, okay. Remember this one here has a test 630 record, and I was hoping to see the name on it, the age of it. Let me see what I have to do. No recurse, no all, plus answer. Okay, and A, all right. No recurse, no all, answer, okay. Let's see what this does. Okay. All right. Let's do one recursively then. That should put it in the cache. Okay. That's working. And now with the no recurse, okay, good. This is what I wanted to show you. Notice that number, 300. Okay, it timed out of the cache because set my detail, where you specify your DNS records, you can say how long to cache them. And I've set mine to be very short as possible, which in my case is 300 seconds. That's the shortest time Cloudflare will let you choose, so that's 5 minutes. So anybody that caches my record is instructed to throw it away after 5 minutes. So it had timed out and there was nothing in the cache. So I did a recursive query. So now it's in the cache and it starts with 300 seconds, and every successive query you can just watch the seconds time down. When this number hits 0, it will be thrown out of the cache and it won't reappear until somebody does a recursive query. So that's a thing to know. And this is the kind of thing, if you can see that from say the load balanced system like OpenDNS, you could probably diagnose even more from that number. I haven't tried this, but let me see how it works doing it live. Okay, they don't have it because they've been more than 5 minutes. Let's do a recursive query to put it in a cache there. And let's do a bunch of those recursive queries to try to put it in a lot of caches at OpenDNS. And now let's do the non-recursive one. There's 293 and 7 and 290 and 288 and 287. So you know these times could be used to further guess which server I'm talking to behind the cluster. So you can easily see how, if you think of a cute algorithm, you can make 3 or 4 domains, you can query them at different times, store different cached records, and deduce things about the servers back there from this sort of information. All right. Of course, the famous security blunder of DNS is zone transfers. I mentioned that you have a start of authority server and the other servers have made copies of that data. The way they do it is with zone transfers. You can put up a DNS server and you connect it as a slave to a master server, and the master server sends all the records over by TCP, and that's called a zone transfer. And the Microsoft DNS server, along with its many other sins, used to have zone transfers turned on to any domain by default. And so did the open source ones one time. So you could easily just do a dig, and to do a zone transfer, you can use a variety of tools. The one they do in your book is host -L. You can also do it with dig, AXFR. And this one here, somebody put up a site so you can practice called zonetransfer.me, which is nice. And you can do a zone transfer from it, and you will just see all the records. It'll tell you all the DNS records it has. This is a big security risk because a lot of people have hidden servers. They hide them through obscurity by just having a domain name, like you can have fred.ccsf.edu. And since you don't put a link anywhere to fred.ccsf.edu, probably people won't think of that name, and you can have that server available for some kind of purpose, but most people won't find it to attack it. But if they can do a zone transfer, they get all the domain names at your system. In fact, they even find things in Windows domains. They find every machine at your system because Microsoft Active Directory domains, every time you boot up a laptop, it registers itself in the local DNS server because Microsoft uses DNS for local traffic. Now what you ought to do, you ought to have one internal DNS server inside your firewall that does not accept queries from off-premises to do this, and you should have another one outside the firewall for public use. And the only thing in there should be your public servers, like your email server and your web server. But Microsoft sold a product called Microsoft Small Business Server, which was a domain controller, a DNS server, and an email server, and a web server all in one box. And a lot of people got used to this unsanitary thinking that we only need one DNS server, let's just put everything on one. And so when you do the zone transfer, you get the complete network map of all the machines, even the client machines. And you can deduce the network diagram pretty well by the pattern of subnets, so it's very much value to an attacker. Anyway, that's why you guys should be turned off by default. First time I taught the hacking class in like 2006 or something, they had this turned on at City College. I was teaching 2 sections of the class, and someone said, try the college. And I tried it in class, we got the whole zone transfer, and I saw exciting stuff there. Like we had a server called Hills and Fog, and there was another one called Old Hills and Old Fog. And that's treasure, that's what you hope. You hope that somebody has left something on there still connected to the network, still running, but nobody cares about it anymore. So it's probably years behind on its patches. You could probably hack it and nobody would even notice for a while. You know, that's the good stuff. And by the next section of the class, it was already patched. Somebody in the class told them. I was going to not tell them until after I got to demonstrate it again. But anyway, most people have figured out to turn this off. The University of System in Georgia, you could dump down 1,038 records. At least at one time. I imagine they probably fixed it by now, but they were open. Colleges usually have the most appalling security. Colleges and government agencies are usually decades behind in their security. I know the Department of Homeland Security now has official recommendations for government security, and they do audit of government servers for like the last 5 years, and every year they find 99% of the servers out of compliance. They've decided what the rules are, at least, and they have an auditing process, but they still don't have any way to achieve compliance. No way to train their people. And so anyway, there's a Fierce DNS scanner included in Kali, Fierce, and it will automatically do all these things. It will try a whole lot of attacks, including a zone transfer. Wasn't able to do a zone transfer of my zone, but this is an easy way to do it. Just Fierce in your Kali attack box will try a whole series of DNS attacks, which is handy. And if you do Fierce on zonetransfer.me, it will tell you, neat, it worked. A disconfigured DNS server found that gave me a zone transfer, so it found all these things like this record. Well, that's Google Site Verification, Zone Transfer Me, and so on. Anyway, all right, and here's some more. Like there's a thing called squealy.zonetransfer.me that has a text record that looks like this, which is kind of cute. If you were to put up a text record like that, you might damage people, other servers, and other DNS clients that have an injection flaw. I don't know if it's a joke or if it's actually an attempt to attack anything. Here's shell shock. This is the original attack. The shell shock vulnerability came out about 4 years ago in a whole series of web services. So putting attack strings in there is kind of cute. Here's a cross-site scripting entry. So these might have interesting results when viewed in vulnerable browsers and such. All right, if you want to do DNS tests and you're at a network that filters them, a lot of networks do, especially Starbucks, you might use a looking glass. There's a bunch of them. There are online sites that will let you do DNS queries. And this one will do a DNS health check to see if you've done foolish things. Let's see how it works. I haven't tried this one lately. Link 5H. All right. 5H is here. Because it occurs to me we could do zonetransfer.me. That's a site that we know is vulnerable. Let's see what it thinks of that. Zonetransfer.me. Run your tool and let's see what it thinks of the health of that. Find bugs on your domain? Well, I don't know if we're going to find any good bugs or not. Looks like it's going to take too long in any case. I'll just leave it going and proceed. We'll come back and see if it ever found anything. All right, we're down to some Kahoots. We can do that while waiting. The online viewers, I'm going to run a Zoom session so you have a fair chance at the Kahoots. So join with Zoom if you want to do it. The instructions are on my other class, like CNIT.123. And the City College has a 30-second delay, which makes it impossible to win the Zoom, impossible to win the Kahoot, but Zoom does not have any delay, so you'd have a fair chance to win if you connect this way. Anyway, let me bring up the Kahoot. Looks like that thing is not working, which is not too surprising. Those free scanners tend to go down. Unless they actually have some way of making money, they're only up for a little while. We are 124. Information gathering part 1, okay. Good. The options look good. Yes, all right. All right, looks like I don't have any remote users attempting to do the Kahoot, but that's all right. It's there if anyone cares. 917317. Ah, there we go. There's someone attempting to make some kind of unusual characters there. We'll be getting some ASCII art in Japanese and SQL injection and stuff in there. That's all good. All right, so, that's either some, here's some people that joined the Kahoot. Good. 4 people, good. So hopefully those people will have a chance to play. This is CNET 124. It is 921. Kahoot. All right. I guess I'll wait another 5 seconds. Looks like I got everybody that's coming. Okay. So, 5 questions. What tool will find out what technologies are powering any website? All right, that's Netcraft. Looks like I had a typo in it, but it's still more or less recognizable. All right. What DNS record finds an email server? All right, that's MX, stands for Mail Exchange. All right, what dig switch performs cache snooping? All right, that is no recurse. A non-recursive query tells you if the information is on that specific server, not somewhere else. And that's what you do for cache snooping. If it's on there, that means somebody else before you went to that page recently. All right. So what kind of DNS query do you use for normal web browsing? If you just type something in your web browser. All right. A normal query is recursive. You want the answer. You say, go find the answer. I don't care how you get it. That's the most common type of query. All right, what DNS record finds an IPv6 address? All right, and that's a quad A record. In the early days, they called it an A6 or A4 record, but the ultimate name that was approved was quad A. So I'll take 3 winners, which is Tip, 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 and Cam, who I know who that is, and PC Load Letter. All right. So those folks will have to tell me later who they are to get their points. Well, here we are at 10 minutes to 7. Let's take a 10-minute break before we continue. So one common thing you want to do is hunt for email addresses. One common use of this is for advertising, so you can spam them. And of course, you also want to do them if you're doing social engineering for a pen test, where you're going to send emails to people at the company and try to get them to click on a link or download an attachment. This is the most common way you take over companies. The most common way the bad guys do it, and the most common way the good guys do it is by sending email. You just have to carefully, first you do open source intelligence, you research the company until you know something to put in your email. Like if you research City College, until recently there's an accreditation crisis, so you could just send an email that says the college has lost its accreditation, it's closing, the attached PDF file lists who's fired this week and who has another month. Everybody will open that. Or something about the parking, find some issue at your company that will make people read the email and then send them spam. So the first thing you have to do is find email addresses. There's a tool in Kali called the Harvester, which will just search many likely places to hunt down email addresses for a company. So here it is running on Edge Security, which I think is the textbook author's website, and it found a series of emails here. It searches Bing and Google and other online sources just automatically. And then it goes to the IP address, and it looks for other sites hosted at the same IP, which I mentioned before, and assumes they're probably related and looks over there for emails. So you find all the emails that are likely to reach inside that company, even if they pretend to be a different company, because especially shady companies tend to keep changing their domain name and host them all on the same server. Maltego is the most famous tool for this kind of open source intelligence. I've never gotten any good out of it. I hear a lot of people brag about it, but I can't remember any case where anybody actually found anything useful here. But anyway, people say it's useful. You can put in a domain name and it will then hunt the web and see everything you're connected to. And this is the kind of stuff that conspiracy theorists come up with. It will prove that anybody is related to somebody else through 2 or 3 intermediates. It's useless for me because I have these news links with hundreds of links every week going everywhere, so it shows me connected to every site on the internet. So I don't know what you're going to make of that. But anyway, it does let you search for people, and then it shows people connected to other people in a variety of ways. And there's a free version and a paid version, and like I say, supposedly you could track down the affiliates of a company and the remote locations. It wasn't through using this tool, but I heard a fun story at one of the security conferences from a company that was doing physical penetration testing. They were doing penetration testing on a power company in Pennsylvania, and they had a secret site where they were doing secret development work, and the location was a secret, so you couldn't find it on their website. So they were supposed to do a pen test, and the issue is, can you break into the secret site? And they just got the employees' names, and then they looked on Foursquare, and some clown was doing Foursquare check-ins at the secret site, which gave them the geographic location. And they drove out there and found the fence and dug a hole under the fence and got into the top secret site.
We had grilled cheese at the secret location.
Yeah, they were doing something there. But I mean, that's the thing. If you actually, this happens to the military too. People in the Army were taking shots and posting them on Twitter and Facebook, and they had GPS coordinates in it, and the Iraqis found it and actually targeted mortar strikes based on those GPS coordinates. So the military started putting strict rules against social media. It's a problem, People leave trails everywhere. So you can see things here. I guess I tried it on me, and it shows you various things it found. URLs and phone numbers and email addresses associated with me. So you might find good things here. And I suppose if you can somehow find like a training course or a blog or something to guide you into using the tool, you might have some way to dig through the vast amount of spammy results and find the good stuff. And then there's port scanning, which everybody uses. Nothing wrong with this. This is usually, so first you do open source intelligence to find out information about the company and the people, and then you eventually want to analyze their servers. There are servers you find. So the first thing you do is find servers, and if you're nearby, the best tool is NetDiscover, which will do an ARP scan of the local network. If you are not local to the company, which is often the case, then you have to search over the internet, so the only thing you can see are public IP addresses, and then you just scan an IP address block. And so anyway, you can do now some services you can get a banner by just connecting to them. So this is an SMTP server on port 25, and if you connect to it, it will send you a banner. Name of the machine, SMTP server, the version it's running, so that's handy. A lot of services will just tell you what they have, and if the administrator just has a default installed, it'll even tell you what version they have, and then you can just Google that version and see if there's a known vulnerability in it. And if they're stupid enough to leave the version number in the banner, they're probably stupid enough to not update their stuff, and you're in. And if you connect to my server, it tells you exactly what version of OpenSSH it's running, because I've just done a default install of OpenSSH, and it also tells you far more information than you ought to. This is, I don't know why this persists in being the standard. Developers by default advertise what version you're using because they're thinking, when I debug it, the customer that has a problem needs to tell me what version they're using. So I'll just put the version number on everything. They're not thinking like security people, where the version number is actually privileged information. All the customer needs to see is welcome to my SSH server, please log in. That's what it should say. It should not tell me any of this detailed information. That can do a legitimate person no good, and it's quite useful to the attacker. But by default, everything does that. It's ridiculous. All right, so Nmap is your main tool for scanning. Free, never been commercial at all, runs on every operating system. And now it's even got a GUI for Windows and even a GUI for Linux if you want it, but mostly people use it from the command line. If you use -S, capital S, that is the standard Nmap scan. This is called a stealth scan because it does an incomplete handshake. You send a SYN to the server. If the port is closed, the server sends you an ACK. If it's open, it sends you a SYN ACK. And regardless, if you get an ACK, the game is over. If you get a SYN ACK, you apply with a reset, not an ACK. So you do not complete the handshake. The point of this is it's faster, it involves the minimum amount of packets being sent, and it usually keeps you out of the logs, because someone who does not even complete the TCP handshake cannot possibly have sent or received even 1 byte of data from the server. So they can't have logged in, they can't have seen anything that matters, they can't have gathered any information, so you'd have to be nuts to log things like that. These things happen all day long as people are trying to connect on the cell phone and they lose the signal and such. So, it's likely that you won't appear in the logs, although this particular tool is so common that if they're running any kind of intrusion detection system like Snort or anything, they're probably running a rule to detect Nmap and block it because everybody knows that everybody's Nmapping everybody. And there are even some options in Nmap to randomize the order of ports and stuff to try to make it harder for the intrusion detection systems to tell you're using Nmap. Anyway, like I say, that's one issue. It's so popular that a lot of sites will spot Nmap scans, at least default scans. So that's a SYN scan. Same thing we had, doesn't complete the handshake. So here's what happens if you scan the Server 2008 target. It took about 40 seconds, pretty fast, and it found a bunch of open ports. This is the machine you've made in the projects here that we're going to be using to practice various attack tools. And of course, it's running like a dozen insecure versions of services listening on ports, so we can practice hacking into it lots of different ways. The version scan with -SV will then not only do most of the handshake to find out that the port is open, it will then do a real handshake, make a real connection, and see if there's a banner. And if there is a banner, it will then find out what version. And this takes 110 seconds, and then it tells you what version everything is, because they're all giving you banners, and most of the banners tell you the version. And if that's accurate, which it usually is, because the only reason your version is in there at all is because it's just a default install, then you can pretty easily tell what attack to run. Of course, if you're a sadistic guy, you're supposed to change the version to just something generic, but if you're really cruel, you'd change the version to be wrong and waste people's time as they try attacks that aren't going to work. That's another way you could go. But most of the time, the reason the version is in there is because it's just a default install and these people have no security consciousness at all, which is the case of most companies. They have a network administrator who is not trained in security and is just trying to keep things up and running and not really anywhere near worrying about details like this. UDP scans were considered useless until about 2010 because UDP has no handshake. If you send a UDP packet to a server, it doesn't reply. And you don't even know if it's closed or open or anything until in 2010, Nmap finally thought of one of those things that I wish I'd thought of 20 years earlier. Don't send random packets, send legitimate requests to known UDP services on the expected port. Like send a legitimate DNS request to port 53 and continue in this vein, and you can find if there are normal UDP-based services running on the expected port, at least, by sending full legitimate messages, which will revoke responses. So this is slightly more useful these days, although still not very useful. And the -SU will let Nmap do a UDP scan, and it will find things, but if you move them to an unexpected port, it won't find them, and so on. It's still much more difficult to scan UDP than TCP. but it can find some information. So this took 1,200 seconds to scan UDP, because the problem with things that don't respond at all is you have to send a packet and then wait for a long time to give up, like 60 seconds, and then resend it like 3 times, because when you don't get an answer, you don't really know what's going on. It might have just gotten lost in transition. So scanning things that don't answer is really slow, because you have to wait for a lot of timeouts.
And then how do you know that something happened if it doesn't respond?
Programs make some standard policy. Typically what they do is try 3 times, and if you don't get an answer, then they say it's not there. But you can configure that kind of stuff.
So you might get an answer.
Yeah, you might. That's what, you know that you don't want to just say every time you don't get an answer, that means it's not listening. You want to try a couple more times. But if you have TCP, you always get an answer. Unless a firewall blocks it, you get a SYN ACK if it's open, and you get an ACK if it's closed. So the scan doesn't take any time either way. That's why firewalls that block everything are considered the safest. Then you get no answer, even with TCP, and then it slows down your scan a lot, because you're waiting for whatever the time is to give up on things. Nmap, now, if you scanned all 65,000 TCP ports, it would take a long time, like a half hour or an hour typically. So Nmap by default scans 1,000 interesting ports, which are the most popular ports. And Fyodor, actually, the guy that wrote Nmap, he's around here frequently, I've seen him. He scanned the entire internet for like the top 1,000 ports or something to decide what the most common ports were to base this data. And he has a whole, I've seen him have a blog with all of his hate mail. People writing letters, we're going to sue you, we're going to lock you up, how dare you scan us. And he said, when people find out though that he's Nmap, almost everybody says, oh, this is great, we're glad to help. Everybody loves Nmap. And it's so handy. Nobody seems to be mad enough to prosecute him, and no one, as far as I know, has ever been prosecuted for doing an unauthorized Nmap scan. In practice, 2 things that might be slightly illegal but seem to be completely unprosecutable are Nmap scans and connecting to unencrypted wireless networks. Both of those are technically small crimes, but I've never known anybody to be punished for doing them. Anyway, so of course, if you ran the scanner really fast and it was a denial of service attack, that would be a crime and you could be punished for that. But anyway, that's the game. So this will try 1,000 ports to make the scan not take forever and find most interesting services. But if you really want a thorough scan, you have to specifically say -P 1 to 65,535, and then it will really scan all the ports, and that will take a while, but then you'll know. Yeah.
Sam, for unsecured wireless networks, I mean, theoretically, couldn't you have an SSID that's the same as someone else's, and if they have it and your device has it cached, it'll auto-connect to it if it's in range?
Yes, but
you wouldn't even know.
Yes, and I'm just for the stream, I'll repeat it. You're quite correct. Some people accidentally connect to unsecured SSIDs because they buy a Linksys router, their neighbor buys a Linksys router. There was a guy that posted a blog and said, I've been using my neighbor's wireless for 2 years and I never noticed, because it was working, and then one day I noticed my wife unplugged it and didn't plug it back in, and my internet's still working. I've been using his all this time without knowing. So I mean, you could target that, but even if you just park outside some coffee house and use their network without buying a cup of coffee, nobody's been prosecuted for that. Although I think this is pretty much over now because everybody's encrypting everything now. There are very few unprotected wireless networks. So the Nmap version scan will actually crash this server we're using, and this is something to be aware of. This is the kind of thing that people might try to prosecute you for. They might have a crappy server like Windows 98 running some junky old version of something, and then your scan crashes it because it's just unstable. If you took my hacking class, you know that we attack this stupid FTP server, and that thing is miserable. It crashes half the time. Half the time the attack kills it. So it is true that people running crappy old services will have things fail when you scan them, and then they can try and attack claim that you ruined my life, you took down my server, you're a rotten hacker, and you might have to defend yourself to some extent. So that kind of thing is some risk. This is why when you do pen tests, you have a contract. You say, it is possible that my pen test may disrupt services, and we will, before I do this, we'll have a contract that limits my liability. Just like if somebody fixes your roof, they might, rain might come in and ruin your priceless paintings or something, and that should be in the contract. So you have considered whose fault that is and who's going to pay for it if something like that happens. Every tool has some possibility of bringing something down. Many years ago, a student brought a professional scanner to the college, and I asked for permission to scan the college, and he said, sure, go ahead. And he ran it, and it was much, much, much noisier than I thought it would be, and it froze up some campus servers. And boy, I was glad I had authorization. Because Tim, the network administrator, did not tell anybody in his department. He said, I'm going to see if they notice. And they noticed. They tracked down this tack from my room. They turned off the network in our room. They said, what are you guys doing in there? And I said, but this is authorized. They said, nobody talked to us. And I said, you know, it occurs to me, I didn't get that authorization in writing. Just at this moment, I kind of wish I had. But Tim remembered, thank God. Get it in writing, because people might get mad at you and be more inclined to like beat you up than really inquire any more deeply into it. So I got a Kahoot about that stuff. Okay, 5 questions. What tool connects to a single port? All right, so that's Netcat. In Windows, you often use Telnet that does the same thing, just connects to one port. You can see what's happening. Which tool finds all open ports? All right, that's Nmap, of course, very popular tool. Okay, which one will find email addresses? The harvester, good. All right. What's the Nmap switch to find DNS servers? On SSU, we'll do a UDP scan, and DNS runs over UDP primarily, so that's what you have to be scanning is UDP 53 to find them. Oh, that's quite a name. Oh, I see it's a drawing. I thought it was some foreign language, but it's just a pretty good drawing. Anyway, all right, so which tool is often blocked by IDS? Okay, that's Nmap, good. All right, so that's the winners, the face, one, an EC, and Kokeshi. All right, so I'm going to clean up and go to Science 214. I'll help anybody that wants to work here. And by next week, I'm hoping to have a pass the hash attack on a Windows domain working. I've been working on that for the last few days. We'll see how it goes. Oh, by the way, I should mention we have access to Microsoft software again. If you if you're in any of my classes, I've added you to the list today. So if you go to my homepage and go to Microsoft Imagine here, you can get a small selection of Microsoft products. We don't have the full version we used to have yet. That is passing through the Glacial City College purchasing system. None of us may live long enough for that to happen. But before that, we do have access to like Windows 10, Windows 8, Server 2012, Server 2016, and a couple versions of Visual Studio. So there's some products are available, and you can all log in there with your City College email address. Anyway, if you won, let me know. I'm just going to clean up and go to the lab.